Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We got some news and a little bit of format updates. Our show is now on Spotify, so you can find that. I'll be sending out the link if you search for the Southbound Sports Show, or I just believe Southbound Sports. It should come up. Make sure you follow us on there if you are a Spotify user. And again, you can find it anywhere else on iTunes. And if you want it on a podcast host that you don't see, send us an email at contact@southboundsports.com, and I'll make sure that we get it added to your platform. I know a couple people have asked for Spotify, so we're excited that it's finally on there. As for the show with that, we're going to switch up, so let us know how this goes. I want to start focusing on a football topic before we get into high tempo, since that's the main focus of our show. And I got a good one for you this week, Matt. Because as a coach, I want to see how you handle this. I'm watching the AAF football game between Birmingham and Memphis. Johnny Manziel gets signed into the AAF. He's on there. Before I get into my part, I wanted to see if you saw this first. He gets sacked in the third quarter. The defensive lineman comes up, starts talking trash, and on network television, because they have the mic up, Johnny Manziel, you know, he calls the guy a bitch ass. Did you see that?
I did see that.
I thought that was hilarious, just for no reason other than, which is my question for you as a coach this week. How do you deal with like your quarterback confidence? Because Manziel had it. He's out there talking trash. You could see it. On the other hand, Birmingham, and I know that they might have had a quarterback switch. I can't remember what the name of their quarterback is, because I gave him some tips. Sign big name quarterbacks like Johnny Manziel if you want the league to be out there and marketable and easy to catch into, but they didn't do that. So I don't know the name of the Birmingham quarterback.
I want to say it was Perez, but don't quote me on that.
It might have been Perez. But anyway, they go to overtime. Birmingham has the ball. 4th down and 18. He drops back in the pocket. Of course, they have to throw for the end zone because they didn't pick the field goal attempt. I don't even know if they can do that in this league. And instead of throwing the ball up in the end zone, he just throws it out of the end zone. He throws the ball away. As a coach, how do you handle that situation and the lack of awareness? Because it frustrated me to no end.
One of the things that I try to do with my quarterbacks, and first off, you have to take out all your preconceived notions when you're dealing with quarterbacks, because they're the heartbeat of your offense. And so you really can't chew them out the way you do a running back or a wide receiver or your offensive line, because basically, as a coach, you have the chalk and you can draw up any scheme, any play, any whatever, but at the end of the day, you make that call and then you put your chalk down. And the defensive coordinator looks at your formation and makes their call and puts their chalk down, and the person that's holding it last is your quarterback. So you gotta work to give him and have that relationship where they're as confident as they can be. Now, with that being said, you need to coach. That's something that situational awareness is something that I think the good coaches really preach. I know I watched a lot of footage from Belichick where he talks about the game within the game and dealing with if it's 4th down, be wary of the time and be aware of where you're at. And we try to focus on that with our team right now, that you don't take those things into consideration. It ends up biting you, whether it be, clock management, game management. It's an important part to football, and it's what separates the average teams from the great teams.
And it goes beyond that, because it's almost like he wasn't trying to win. At no point on a 4th down should you not be throwing it up and trying to let your guy catch it. I thought for anything, he could have thrown it, even check down underneath, try to get the ball into a playmaker's hands. For him just to throw it away and then casually start walking to the sideline, pop his helmet off like it was a regular 4th down. I could see if it was 3rd down and you're punting a game away, or if it's tied game and it's regulation, but that Memphis is going to come out and try to score and pull off the upset. And that's exactly what they did with Johnny Manziel. and I was very impressed with him, and I wish that the league would have went after him sooner. I know he had some contract stuff with the Canadian Football League, so that might not have been possible, but there's no reason that this league can't get actual quarterbacks that win games. There's a reason I don't know who this Perez guy is, because what big game is he quarterbacked in? Like, do you know where he's from?
Not off the top of my head.
Exactly. I can name a ton of quarterbacks from college that have played in big games. I know, like, even from the Memphis side, they tried to sign Christian Hackenberg that everyone was high on, and he still had the same accuracy issues and decision-making issues. But bring in a quarterback that fans might tune in to see play. They're not tuning in for some Perez guy from a smaller school. Or even if he was at a bigger school, he didn't win on the stage where people would remember his name. I think, like, you could even get a guy like A.J. McCarron. I think he's in the booth nowadays. Get a big-name guy. Bring him in. You can't tell me this is the best that the league is able to roll out. You only have 8 teams. You can find 8, I don't want to say washed-up quarterbacks, but 8 quarterbacks that were overlooked.
But I think the one thing that you're overlooking in this is that they're not willing. I think it's capped at $250,000 a year, and I think a lot of those quarterbacks that you're talking of, typically a guy like Manziel's gonna want multi-million-dollar deal, multi-million-dollar contract. That was one of the things that it prevented Kaepernick from going to the AAF, was the fact that he was trying to demand a ridiculous salary to go there, and they were kind of like, that's not the way that works here. So that's a no-go. But I tip my cap to Manziel for being willing to step out and take that league minimum to try to get himself promoted back into the league.
To step out, no one was going to sign him. A lot of these guys, no one's going to sign. If you're in the booth, or if you're Tim Tebow, like, come in and give it a shot. Tim Tebow could come back right now. They're not really going to give him a shot on the Mets. I was hoping they would call him up last year, and they easily could have to sell a bunch of tickets because it was the Mets. Who cares? But they didn't. And now you have other guys that are in the booth. Just bring him in. What's Jimmy Clausen up to these days? You can't tell me he wouldn't take a 6-figure payout to come throw a ball around and talk trash. That's exactly what the league needs. I hope he ends up in the XFL. That's the one reason I hope the XFL comes back and they're bigger and better, because they need that aspect of trash talking. And right now, Manziel is the only one. He came into the league for 1 week, and that's the only guy that anyone is talking about. So I can even switch the topics on our board, because Manziel right now undefeated in the AAF, 1-0, and I don't think that they are close enough to even make a run at the playoffs. I believe Orlando has clinched. They only take 2 spots from each division, I believe. And Birmingham is right there. I mean, I guess Birmingham would have to lose out, but there's only a couple of games left. I don't know if it's mathematically possible for another team to get in this late. Do you have anything else you want to talk about on the AAF?
As far as the AAF, I don't even think, was Manziel even in the game at the very end?
Yeah, he threw the game-winning touchdown. It was like it was an overtime. Right after that guy threw the ball away, Perez. It came down. Manziel threw like 3 passes. The game-winning pass was like let's be honest. I was watching on my phone, which you know that if you're watching on your phone, that they don't give you like the good camera angle.
I wanted to clarify, because I rewatched the tail end of it, because I had some family function with my in-laws and ended up missing the majority of the game. And as I was rewatching the highlights, it was Brandon Silvers.
Wait,
Brandon Silvers won the game. He had 266 yards and 2 touchdowns. Manziel was 3 of 5 for 38 yards and ran for 20 yards on 2 carries. He saw limited action.
He didn't throw the game-winning touchdown?
No, it was Brandon Silver. Manziel was on the bench. I had to double check that, because I didn't think that was right. But I was like, did I end up watching the wrong game? Did I end up watching the wrong thing?
Well, you could be onto something. This could be a case of where everyone talks about another guy, and they just keep talking about Manziel and showing his limited highlights. And like I said, I was watching on my phone, So they have the behind, kind of like the Madden camera, is the view that they use. And I wasn't watching close enough to see who the quarterback was. I just assumed it was Johnny Football out there because everyone was talking about him getting the win. So let's take a look and see if I can bring that up now.
Because as you pulled that up, I didn't see he was in during that drive. And the one thing that I saw from Memphis that they did well as they were driving down to tie that up was that they found a receiver that they really liked and were isolating him one-on-one. And he was a bigger, I don't know if he was a tight end type, but they were flexing him out and they had him running slants, and it was just they were moving the ball right down the field. And I thought this was the kind of things that they really needed to be doing the whole time instead of the ground and pound from the 1985 Chicago Bears offense that Singletary was trying to run with them. So I thought this was steps in the right direction, and maybe just the extra confidence from adding Manziel on the roster is going to move them in a positive direction so that they're playing with a little bit more confidence. Because as a quarterback, that's the thing that you really need. You need to be confident and being willing to take those shots. And with my quarterbacks, I always just said, if you pull the trigger on a throw, be willing to tell me why you made that read or what you saw, because I can correct if you looked in the wrong spot, but I can't correct I just did what I wanted.
Yeah, I to be honest, I tried to bring it up to verify because, again, you would think that they wouldn't be talking about Manziel the whole time if he wasn't the quarterback. I look on their app, they don't even have recaps from last week, which is crazy to me. If you're trying to promote the league, I could easily find that on the NFL. Maybe it was due to fantasy football that they started to put all kind of stats on there, but you could see who was in what drive. But I'm going to look that up, and I'll clarify, and I'll put that on Twitter. We'll put that out and try to give a breakdown because he was out there. I assumed it was him. But either way, you got to be willing to take that shot in overtime. And that's exactly what Memphis did. Come out, play with confidence. I know they're, 2-5 now? So they would almost have to win. They have to win out to break even, 5-5. There's a 10-game season. They're playing Orlando this week. Orlando's already clinched.
That's a big one. That's a big win.
So we'll see. Is Orlando going to even rest guys? I don't think you would do that in this league, but who knows? It's a brand new league. We'll see what happens. I think Orlando is still the team to beat because I think they have the best coaching. We can go back to what you said about the old pro-style offense. Everyone's running it there, and for whatever reason, they're trying to bring these quarterbacks in that I don't know where they came from. A lot of them don't have that pro-style offense experience. Unless you were a backup in the NFL, you don't get that. Barely any any programs in college run a pro-style offense anymore. And even those that do, like you could even say when Florida State had Jimbo Fisher, even Michigan with Harbaugh, they don't run the traditional pro. They're all turning into more of a spread style anyway. I can't name one team that runs NFL-style pro offense in college right now. Can you?
Kansas probably will. Les Miles is there, your boy.
Because Les took the last 3 years off to be in a Challenger movie, and he's coming back. He took his hand at acting.
He's going to be the Challenger going in the Big 12. Let's go with 3 tight ends.
Hey, you never know. If only they had the old North and South divisions. He could have been the new Nebraska, the North team that goes like 6-6 and is in the championship game only to get slaughtered. Perfect situation for him. But we'll see. I don't even know what he's going to run. It could be crazy out there. But let's go ahead and switch into the NFL, the big news, which I'm going to get torn apart on. Gronkowski retires. What's your take, Matt?
I think this hurts him. I know you're going to give me all the Brady stats, but I think when you watch the game and he's in, he affects so much of what New England's offense can do and what they can do scheme-wise because he's such a matchup nightmare. They put him out on the outside, and almost like what Horn did for Memphis. He's a big receiver, and you have to commit 2 people to him, and when you do that, it makes things so much easier for everyone else out on the field. So I do think that I'm curious to see what this season is going to bring for New England, because that's a gigantic hole that they have to fill now.
Well, I could say that they're not going to be hurt by the Gronk loss, but statistically I would assume that they are, just because of Gronk's size and how much other teams had to focus on him. Am I shocked by his retirement? And no. Do I blame him? No. Do I think he's going to come back? Yes, I do. And I think he's going to start sitting out regular seasons because, number one, it matters 0. If you watch any NFL games that he's played in, other teams specifically target him and try to take him out. There were times when they're just trying to blow his knee out. And he's, 20-something? Why would he ever put himself in harm's way like that, where teams can just blow out his knee? I know Robert Kraft's a little bit preoccupied lately, but I would assume that if Gronk said, hey, I'm going to sit this one out and I'm going to come back if you need me in the playoffs, I don't know what the NFL rules are, but I would assume that he could play like week 17 and then be ready for the playoffs. Why not? Why risk playing week 5 when you could be hurt potentially for the rest of the season? Teams aren't going to know what to focus on in the playoffs. And to be honest, that's why I don't think they need him. In the regular season, they were what? I think I had the stats. They were 14 and I think it was 3 without him. And overall, they're 1-2 in the playoffs. So if the numbers don't match up, you can figure it out. Because they're 1-2 in the playoffs without him, which is why I think he'll be back for the playoffs. Overall, they're 15-7. So they can make the playoffs with a record like that. You don't need to be drastically over 500 to make the playoffs in the regular season. It doesn't matter what kind of help you can get on offense. Tom Brady will make it work. They don't run complex stuff. It all comes down to his quick decisions. Get Gronk healthy. Let him sit out a few years, whatever. I don't really see him signing anywhere else other than with Tom Brady. Why not come back for another run? I think his agent Rosenhaus, he made a comment that he is still up in the air and he's been trying to talk him into coming back. But if you're his agent, just see if you can work out a deal where you kind of sit out the regular season and come back for the playoffs. I think that's what hurt Le'Veon Bell, if I'm being honest. I think if he would have came back, what week was it that we lost to the Raiders? 15, 14? If he would have came back and helped the Steelers beat the Raiders and then make the playoffs, and he would have got maybe the contract that he needed. But by sitting out the whole year, you kind of hurt yourself. So Gronk, I think, sit out the regular season, come back a week or 2 left, and be there as a target in the playoffs. I think it could be done. What do you think?
I don't think that he could come back that late. I don't know what the rules are as far as players that retire, because I'm sure that there's some kind of designation for them that affects their ability to be on the active roster, because that would almost be I think open themselves up to a collusion type deal where you're going to say, all right, well, if you're going to come back, then we're gonna save that roster spot for you, and we'll cut this guy to make room for you on the active. Like that's I think that opens a can of worms that would probably lead to some kind of investigation for him doing that. I do think that at some point he's going to come back, because I think he's young enough that he can still come back and contribute and definitely still play. He may end up getting himself into financial trouble, and like a lot of players fall back on what he needs to do.
That's so stereotypical. Every NFL player goes broke. I thought I saw that he's been saving all his paychecks, though. I thought I saw an article where they said every paycheck he's been putting away so much of in case he would retire. So maybe he's...
Well, that's great if he is, but you see the stories are constantly being publicized about players that go bankrupt, that they end up having to go back to old jobs or different publicity things to try to make money because they blew through their NFL contract. So if he did make that thing, then good for him. But I do think that playoff football is a lot different than regular season football, and I think that's where it's reflective with you said that New England was 1-2 without him. I mean, the majority of that playoff run, he's there. So when he's missing time, it's regular season time. I know there really was only one season maybe that he played close to a full season. The majority of the time, he was missing time during the regular season. But it was like once the playoffs rolled around, he was healthy enough to get going. And I think it just created just crazy matchups.
I think if you look back at it, and of course they don't have a Gronk or compares a player of his caliber on the team right now, but when Aaron Hernandez got kicked off the team or whatever happened with him, they talked about the drop-off that Tom Brady was going to have, just like when Randy Moss left, just like when Ocho Cinco left. Every time he's had a big-name receiver leave, everyone always talks about, oh, just wait now, there's no one that's going to demand this type of coverage or just focus from the defense. And he still gets it done. So there's any receiver out there that could sign. I mean, what happened to Jordy Nelson? He was cut by the Raiders after they signed Antonio Brown. Is he still available? Like, that's a very Patriots-type pickup, if he is, and I don't know if they are. So close to the NFL draft. I'm almost waiting to see what they do with the draft picks. There are some big-bodied wide receivers. I know, like, Michigan has a guy coming out that's 6'7", that at the pro day supposedly ran a 4.6 after running a 4.9 on the NFL day. If that's true, if he did get his speed up, why not just take a big-bodied tight end that you can flex out? I mean, he's not the only one that's going to be in the draft. Iowa always has a bunch. Just take one.
Yep.
See what happens. So I think they can fill that role. I think that role, just based on the way colleges are using tight ends these days, where you have kind of like a bigger bodied, think Mike Gesicki at Penn State, a guy that's focused mainly on receiving. I really think that that's where the drop-off isn't going to be as harsh with Gronk, because they might be able to pick it up, some of the slack, by getting a blocking tight end. And there are plenty journeyman tight ends that are floating around the league that can focus on blocking. So, you have anything else on Gronk?
No, that was the main thing that I just wanted to see what the offense is going to look like, because, you know, given credit where it's due, Belichick takes what he has and molds it around the players that he's able to acquire. So, I mean, it's not like you're going to see them completely go belly up and be a one-win team. They're going to be a playoff team this coming year. You know, for the most part, things were intact, and I'm sure he had some kind of contingency plan, given that Gronk was potentially talking about retiring. And with his string of injuries and being targeted, you're right, the way he's being targeted, you almost have to have that backup of when inevitably he gets injured, because that next injury could be the last injury. That what's the next plan as far as game planning? And you always want to look, not that you're hoping that something bad happens, but you better have a plan in place in case the key people in your organization go down. You know, I'm sure he has something that if Brady were to go down, he has something that he can do that's going to keep the team going in the right direction.
Yeah, you almost have to look at it from the franchise perspective, but that's kind of going downhill now. If you look at Robert Kraft, owner of the Patriots, he is going to fight his charge, in the sexual allegation from that spa. We talked about it a few weeks ago, and I think we both,
my mind.
Yeah, we laid out both scenarios where I thought that if he, and I can't remember what we talked about both through, but I thought he had a good play either way. You either go ahead, say guilty or whatever, and get it pled down so that no one talks about it. Instead, he is fighting to clear his name. The FBI have said that they have 2 videotapes of evidence, which makes me think, Matt, what do you think is on that tape? Do you think there's a masseuse coming up, reaching her hand out, and he's trying to give her a stiff arm? Like, what could he think was on that film that could sway a jury? Because I would 100% think that the FBI is going to play that film in front of a jury. Thoughts? What else could be on that?
I have no idea. That when I saw that he was fighting the charges, I thought that's a ballsy move, no pun intended, because inevitably they're with human trafficking and stuff. That's jail time. So if you swing and miss on this one, you could be looking at jail, could be looking at having to sell the franchise. Like there's a lot of things that are being factored into that. So he better be confident in what he's doing, and it seems like he is because he's fighting it. So I'm completely blown away. I thought he would have just pled it out and let it go.
Especially because it's a federal charge, I believe. So it's not like he can swing his money around and just keep paying and try to bleed the other party down because it's the government. They're just going to keep sending stuff at him. So unless he is 100% confident that whatever they have on that tape doesn't show anything, whether it's monetary or whatever, I mean, definitely a ballsy move, and that could play into the Patriots saga because we talked about it. Other owners have been forced to sell their team. Will he be forced out? If this keeps going and publicly, it's going to be a hit on the league.
Well, I tell you what, the league's going to – I would be surprised if it comes down the pike and they don't force him to sell. I could see the players union having an issue because of how fast they were to get rid of, to cut players that have – off the field issues. This is an off the field issue, and it's a black eye to the league that one of your owners, if you're holding the players to that standard, then you better be holding the owners to it. And I feel like being in a human trafficking and sex trafficking ring, I think that pretty much qualifies as an off the field conduct issue that would be dealt with.
Well, I'll say, and I transitioned us into high tempo here before we get into some of the other stories, but the big parallel right now is I got to find it in my notes, but the San Francisco Giants, they had their CEO, baseball operations or whatever. He was caught by TMZ a while ago. I don't even know if it was big enough that we talked about it on the show, but he was having a public argument with his wife over a phone. Looks like they were wrestling over the phone. I don't know if he tried to grab it out of her hand or what, but instead, they have suspended him until July 1st. If a public argument with your wife can get you suspended, what do you think a federal investigation is going to do? And I know they're different sports, but I would have to think that it's on the same level. That if you're able to get that kind of outrage, that they need to do some type of thing. And the thing that baffles me with this case, I just looked it up. It's the Giants CEO from baseball. But what gets me is that they went to suspend him. Because to me, a suspension means absolutely zero to these guys. You're already making six figures. If it offends your company that much, fire him. What point does it make suspending a CEO? Do you really think that other big name guys are going to get suspended? I mean, look what happened to Kareem Hunt. He was immediately fired for a public dispute. Now, it wasn't his wife, but you have this guy. He's out there. Baseball, the suspension is the weakest thing I think they can do. And it, as a fan, it makes me lose respect for the league because they're holding that guy to a higher standard. And the July thing is just bullshit. Like, that's just an arbitrary date they picked, July 1st, I think. Like, the end of the fiscal year. Like, okay, why don't you just stay out of the limelight as we finish up our financials? Come back July 1, and how about you pitch us our stuff going forward next year? Basically what they did. So, I mean, what do you think, Matt? Two different sports, but you have the same type of public embarrassment. At some point, you can't keep saying it's an embarrassment to the league. We're going to suspend him for a little bit so that he learns his lesson. Like, you're only doing that as a reactionary thing. This came out how long ago? Fire him.
Yeah, I kind of see it the same way. I don't know. What are you supposed to do? Just sit at home then, so that you're never out in public? Like, what if you're having a private conversation? It is what it is, and there's no physical abuse happening.
They were like wrestling over a phone. He didn't like throw a punch. He grabbed the phone. For all we know, she might have locked herself out of the phone. She might have been trying to get into his phone. We don't know what the context was.
They didn't release anything with what happened.
Yeah, they didn't release anything. So if you're the Giants, you either say, hey, it was a public dispute, whatever, he apologized, that's it. Or, hey, we saw the rest of the evidence and he's fired. Like, don't just half-ass it. That's what I take offense to. Because think about it, if it was anyone else at like a menial job and you're doing something to demean the company, they would fire you in a heartbeat. But because this guy is the CEO, they kind of let him side with a free vacation. Because let's be honest, he doesn't need the money. He can take 3 months without pay or whatever it ends up being. April, May, June, yes, 3 months. Well, what is the big deal? You can't tell me that he wasn't doing his job while the investigation was going on, because they almost brushed it under the rug. So I don't know. And I think Kraft, the same thing. If you own the team and it's your thing, sure, they could force you out, I guess, because if other teams don't want to play the Patriots, but really, there's no recourse that they could have. They're either going to try to force him to sell. I guess if he went to jail, then they could have a case. But there's already all kind of tax loopholes for these big franchises. I don't know. Just let's get into your high tempo. What do you got for us this week?
The owners' meetings are going on this week, and they approved 2 big rule changes that, quite honestly, I think blow. The big one was to expand on player protection. They voted to eliminate the blindside blocks. So any of the peel back blocks, they said a third of of all concussions on punts were caused by blindside blocks. So with the rule change, any forcible contact with his head, shoulder, or forearm is prohibited. So anytime you see where the players are coming back, and essentially it was all the hits that I used to look for, they're now penalties. Is the first one. I mean, in terms of player safety, I think it's definitely going to prevent injuries, but it's also a tough thing that as you're coming back, you're going to have to be creative with how you stop those players, because those are the kind of blocks that really spring the big touchdown runs and long returns. So I think that one hurts. And the other one was that all offensive and defensive pass interference calls, as well as non-calls, can now be challenged. So, for example, in the Super Bowl, the Brandon Cooks play in the Super Bowl, under the way that the rules are changed, would have been called a pass interference, and the Rams would have had the ball on the 1 yard line. So it's trying to clean the game up and get the calls right. But I think in the long run, it's going to be a pain in the ass, because it's going to be another thing that's going to slow the game down and try to constantly be policing. Is it a catch or isn't it a catch? What are we looking for here? That I just don't like it.
It's my beef too. No one wants to see a coach's challenge. It's annoying. No one cares. We already know what the outcome is going to be, most likely. And if not, everyone's fired up on their social media, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. They're ready to put out their opinion on whether it was a catch or not a catch or a pass interference. Now you are just wasting more time. And I would think that with more and more time, what's going to happen is they're just not going to go ahead and take it into account. They're not going to look at it. And I mean, like, let's say you're watching a game. You're just going to ignore the outcome. And then whenever the outcome comes up, you just read through the stats, check your fantasy lineup. If you have to sit there at the bar and wait for a coach to throw a flag on a play that you can clearly see was, like, let's say an incomplete pass. A lot of them are like, the ball was on the ground, you can see it, you know what they're going to call. Or for these receiving ones, like the interference, you're going to see the guy rip the jersey, he's going to pull the jersey, and he's going to do this, that, or anything else, and you're going to see it at home, you're going to know it's going to be the call, and you're going to have to sit through 6 commercials while a guy comes over off the field, all the players go back to their huddle, and the guy cues it up. He sits there with that rewinding button thing they give him, forward, back, just to see exactly what the angle is when everyone else at home has already seen it. Just put a guy in the booth.
But they talked about it. The owner, the coaches, all 32 coaches put it to a vote. All 32 coaches passed it. They were to support putting another referee up in the box. And inevitably, the owners tabled it and weren't willing to put it to a vote. So they were all for just putting the extra official that can just clean it up on the fly. That on some of those plays that you don't need to send it to an official challenge. And let's be honest, we have the worst coach in all of football for challenging plays. So I would rather not give Tomlin an opportunity to challenge plays because he stinks at it. It hurts Pittsburgh more than anything with his blowing timeouts on challenges that he has no business challenging. So I'd rather him not have more to challenge. We'll have no timeouts at the end of the first quarter.
Well, you're saying, I mean, basically what it's coming down to is some fans are going to be happy that this happened, but what you're actually just saying is, okay, we want them to get it right. Like, no, you don't. You want them to give it like a feeling of control to the coach so that you can't say, oh, human error or whatever. They're just still trying to offload it from the refs. Because let's say even if you do the sky judge and he makes the wrong call, or most likely they don't have the right angle, like what do you do in that situation? Here with the challenge, you can kind of be like, oh, we're going to go with it on the field. But keep it as is. Who cares? Just let the guy call it. It's almost just like a regular ref on the field. They have it in the AAF. They call it the sky judge or something like that. Let him reign down supreme. And I've said it before. Get like an old guy like Ed Hockley. I don't even know if he's still around. He's probably retired. Put him up in the booth. Let one of your head guys that retired say, hey, look, we're going to keep paying you, but guess what? You don't have to be running up and down the field with great athletes. You're going to sit up in the cozy booth because you've served us for 30 years, and we're going to keep paying you your salary, and everyone knows your name because you've been on TV for the past 10 years. And then you can make the calls. Like, I think everyone would respect that. I mean, every tournament or every game I watch, doesn't matter what the sport is, football, basketball, I see some new ref or some expert, like CBS. Oh, here's our rules expert. There's no such thing as a rules expert. Was he an official? No. Where did you guys hire him from? Oh, he just graduated from whatever. He's a basketball fan, so he knows the sport. Like, you can't tell me these guys are actual rule experts. So, what are you doing? Hire an old ref, put him in the booth, pay him, get rid of these stupid challenges. It frustrates me when I hear other sports talk about it. Like, oh, baseball, maybe they should add in a coach's challenge. Why? You're talking about putting pitch counts or like countdown shot clocks on pitchers, but yet you're going to add the ultimate time waster, the coach's challenge, that like Matt just demonstrated here, we're just going to piss off fans because, oh, crap, another Tomlin challenge for no reason. Like, what does that do? Just makes your coach look like an idiot. And he might not even be the one making the call. So, I don't even know. It's annoying, and I think it's going to make the games more frustrating to watch. Do you have anything else on it? I mean, is there any way we can spin it in a positive light?
I mean, some of those pass interference calls, we may end up getting a couple more. It may result in some more first downs, which benefits Ben Roethlisberger, who pushes the ball down the field. So you may end up getting some of those calls. But I just worry from the standpoint that if you can start challenging those things, pass interference between wide receivers and defensive backs is like holding on the offensive line. You can essentially call it every single time, every single play if you really want to. And I just worry if you're starting to get so ticky-tack with that it's going to create a really bad imbalance between the offense and defense. And I know that the league, you want to score more points, but it's almost putting the defenses at a disadvantage because now they're really taking a lot of power away with being able to challenge the offensive and defensive pass interference, that I think you're going to see a lot more scoring, but it's also going to hurt defenses.
Yeah, I don't even know. To me, it's such a it's a play that could go either way, and it's just giving them an out or giving someone more control of the game where they can affect the outcome. It's just making me think that with all the gambling and stuff, that the games could be rigged. And you can't tell me that it's not. It happened in the NBA. They had a ref that was rigging the league, and they all pretended that it was only one ref doing it when most likely there are others. So you're giving him an out. So I don't know. It doesn't make much sense to me. Do you have anything else for High Tempo?
No, that was the big one that I had for this week, was just tracking some of the changes that they're making to the rules. And I do think with the Alliance that they are helping to move the direction of some of the rules and things within the game. I didn't mind their overtime. Watching the way that they had it set up, it was from the 10. Each team got a possession. It couldn't end in a tie. They eliminated the field goal so that I know that kind of hurts the field goals and the specials if you have a good kicker. But I think that way you're definitely seeing both offenses have a shot at it. And it was interesting to see, knowing that you're going to have to go for it on fourth down regardless. How does that change the way teams game plan? So might be something that you're going to see in the NFL soon.
Yeah, they're going to do something, I would imagine, to the overtime. And it is a good way to get it done. It's almost what the NCAA basketball tournament does. It seems like each year the NIT keeps doing more and more experimental rules. And with that, they are going and they are just getting extra things that are done to give a test. Like I think they're doing, the 3-point line, they moved that back. They were doing some other things with like the lanes and things like that. And I don't know if it's ever going to be implemented, but at least they give it a place to try it out, where maybe not a lot of fans are going to notice it. But I did have, switching into basketball here, Nebraska basketball has fired Tim Miles, and the rumors going back to last week were that they are going to hire Fred Hoiberg, who brought back Iowa State program a few years ago before he went to the Chicago Bulls. So a pretty bold move to get him on the hook before they even fired Miles, because the rumor was that he's ready to be brought in. They hadn't even fired him yet. They had to wait for him to lose in the NIT. And I mean, he brought the program back. I think he got Nebraska their first NCAA tournament win a few years ago. Has to be pretty hard for him to not be given that chance to build the program back up. I guess they're just taking advantage of trying to get a big name. So I think that's the only other basketball news before we get into the NCAA tournament that I had saw. It's still probably a slow season. Watching the tournament, Matt, what did you think of the first two rounds of games?
Well, first off, condolences to the Coffer family with Mike passing away. And I was pleased with the way that Florida State came out in the second round, and I thought with all the hype and all the media stuff saying, "Oh, Murray State's going to be the sleeper, they're going to knock them out," they came out and just destroyed them. And I felt like, as a team, that they're close to turning the corner as a program, and with Coach Hamilton and what they're trying to do, to go out and play the way that they did, I thought was awesome. And I like that they went out and just took them to the chipper, and moving on now to take on top seeded Gonzaga, which that should be the best game of the week, being that it's a top seed, that maybe Florida State should have been a 4 seed. That maybe they kind of got that wrong.
Well, we'll see. I think the way that these brackets have played out is that you're seeing 3 heavy conferences, the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC. And I want to say that those 3 conferences, and I could have my count wrong based on Sunday night, but I think ACC had 5, Big Ten and SEC both had 4. That's That's what, 13 of the 16? I could be counting that wrong. So you're having almost the entire Sweet 16 from three conferences.
ACC had 5, Big Ten and SEC both.
So you have that coming down, and then everyone else. You have the Gonzaga, which you really don't know. I mean, you've seen them early in the season, but you don't know how that's going to shake out down the league. So you have that as a focus, and then you have what other small teams are left. Oregon, which not a lot of people thought, they upset Wisconsin. And the Pac-12, everyone has said, is historically down. And then you have, what's the other one? Houston? Is that the third team? There might be one other one that I'm missing. I think that's pretty much it, though. Every other team is from the bigger conferences. So it's a strange year. And it's almost like you keep talking about expanding. The more you expand it, the greater the amount of Power 5 conference teams you're going to have left. If you're honestly looking at it. Because they have the money and resources, like Florida State makes enough money from football that they can then inject it into their basketball program and say, hey, look at what we can do. UCF. Basketball program was 0-4 in the tournament until guess what? Their football team started to win, which then helps with visibility. They claim a national championship. They go ahead and they're able to recruit for basketball now. They get a guy that's 7'6". Maybe he wouldn't have ended up there if it wasn't for the football program. We don't know. And then guess what? They almost upset Duke. So I think by expanding the tournament, some of these schools that make their money from basketball, they're really going to start to feel the hurt. And we have the FBI investigation going on too. That the lawyer that was trying to go after Trump, he tried to extort $20 million from Nike on Monday, according to the justice.gov site. I sent the link to it. I'll put it up on Twitter. I sent it to Matt so that we had the facts. It's actually the Department of Justice is going after this guy because he tweeted out on Monday that he was going to put out some connections to Nike and a high school booster in California, which a lot of people have leaked out the supposed name because guess what? Nike has been working with the FBI. They're already under investigation. So of course they're going to know when this guy is trying to extort them for money, which is crazy. Right in the middle of the NCAA tournament, we bring that back up, and we don't know how much that's affecting the bigger programs. Kansas is out. We know that they were paying players. Maryland is out. We know that they were on the list of paying players. What other teams were on that list aren't in the tournament anymore. Arizona, I don't even think they came close to the tournament. So you're going to really see a shift in basketball, and that's where you see teams like Gonzaga or even like Florida State, maybe non-traditional teams, come and make that run. LSU's one that they were caught paying players. Their coach is suspended for paying players, yet they're boldly playing those players anyway. And let's see what happens. I would hate, for one, to see LSU win the national championship only to have it vacated and then hurt a team maybe like Houston or some other smaller team that is able to win the national championship, sort of what happened in Michigan in 2013. I would hate to see that, a scandalized team. Like LSU just ripping through the tournament. They barely beat Maryland. Well, Maryland was a scandalized team too, so it doesn't really matter. But what would happen if LSU plays Florida State in that final, Matt? How would you feel?
Just win. Just win. Play them and win them. That's what I care about. And actually, I'm happy with the way that Ham has him winning, and I'm glad that Florida State didn't force him out the door because, I see the way that this season's playing out for them, and a lot of people had him in hot water when they started out as slow as they did at the beginning of the year. But, I look at what he's doing and the same job that Dabo now has with Clemson, that there were opportunities where impatient fan bases can push to fire coaches before they fully have their program implemented. And you see Clemson now reaping the benefits of having a consistent coach and consistent program. And you're seeing that with Hamilton with his recruiting classes because he's only signing more and more higher ranked players, and they're now starting to compete with the North Carolinas and Dukes.
Oh, you could even say that the poster boy for that would be Michigan's John Beilein. He had his tough transition. They were on sanctions before he got there. It took them years to get in the tournament. They make a surprise run in 2013 all the way to the tournament championship, lose to Louisville that I mentioned earlier. And then after all those guys left early for the NBA, fans were still calling for his head. And because they stuck with him and you're able to build up that program, now he's recruiting at a higher level, gets them back to the national championship last year. And this year, it's the first back-to-back 30-win seasons in history for the program, I believe. So if you get rid of him after only a couple years before you're able to build that program up at a school that historically had runs but didn't have that top-level consistency, where are you going to be? Another one would be Tom Izzo. I mean, he's bowed out of the tournament a few times now, but he's able to keep recruiting. And he has them right now poised to play an LSU team. And then what could be the biggest showdown of the tournament, at least matchup-wise, if Duke and Michigan State were to win at this point, you would have an epic showdown between Michigan State and Duke in that East Regional Final. And I honestly think that's why they put them there. And then, I mean, the NCAA really doesn't lose if that matchup comes to fruition. Duke has to get through Virginia Tech. Michigan State plays LSU, and I think that's the bracket that all eyes are on. I watched the Duke game, and the one thing, and this goes back to like the Johnny Manziel thing, where we talked about if you watch a game and you weren't paying attention, you thought Johnny Manziel was quarterbacking because people were talking about Manziel the entire time. The same thing with Zion Williamson. It was almost like the announcers want him to win. I had to feel bad for UCF fans that were watching the game because I watch it impartial. I really don't care who wins that game because if Duke wins, then I think they have a pretty good chance to keep Michigan State from a Final Four. But if Duke goes down, I think that's also funny because of all the hype. But then you have Williamson coming down, crushes a guy from UCF, absolutely lays him out. And of course he gets called for the foul. And what is the announcer? I think it's Reggie Miller. He's like, oh, let him play. That wasn't a foul. And they showed it in slow-mo. He mauled the guy. But at that point, I realized he doesn't care if it's a fair game. He doesn't want Zion fouled out. So now I have to sit here and listen to Reggie Miller be oogling Zion for the rest of the game, which is exactly what happened. And I honestly thought he could have been called for 3 or 4 extra fouls that they just didn't call on him. And I felt bad for the 7'6" guy from UCF. I can't remember his name. But he fouled out on some very questionable calls. I thought they could have easily, if they were calling it fair on both sides, I don't want to say the game was rigged because UCF still had a chance on the tip back. I thought it was going to go in and they were going to win, but very, very close. But you can't really discount that. And the same thing, it goes back to the NFL stuff. Do I want the ref to have that much control, like on the field, to swing that? Because if you have all eyes on the sky judge, everyone knows who it is. Most people don't care who the ref crew is or know the ref that's calling from the headset because they don't pay attention. But if the television networks are putting, like, let's go with Ed Hockley again. They're putting Ed Hockley in the booth. Everyone knows who's making the calls. He's under the public scrutiny. He's not going to be biased because everyone would call him out on it and want him fired. So by having that extra layer, which these NCAA guys don't have, like, I don't think there's any accountability. Did you see anything like that?
I did actually. The one thing that stood out from the UCF game was that for as much hype as Zion had, I'm surprised that Taco isn't having more push for first round or overall 1-2 pick overall now, because he was like on no one's radar and he made Zion look like a little boy. And even going into the game, I think if he doesn't foul out, I think UCF most certainly would have knocked Duke off. They got him. It was a great work on Duke's part getting him to foul out. Because as soon as he got out, the depth of Duke just took over and ran the game over.
Well, there were two big plays right at the end where I think he would have got the rebound. The missed foul shot that Duke got and tied up the game. Zion choked. No one was talking about that. That was a LeBron-level free throw miss where he clanked it off the front of the rim almost like a laser to the point where his guy had a chance to get it. But I think if the 7'6" guy, Taka, was there, he easily gets that rebound and UCF's shooting foul free throws.
He looked like an adult on a Fisher-Price hoop.
Yeah. And then the last one, the tip-in, if he's under the hoop there, he could have just dunked it. It would have been almost like the NC State dunk for the national championship in 1984. He's right there, and instead, because they didn't have that height, Dawkins grabbed it, tipped it up in, and got to give Dawkins a big shout-out. He used to play at Michigan, transferred there to play with his dad at UCF. Very impressed with him, and I was so disappointed that he didn't get the win because I thought he deserved it. Had over 30 points in that game, made a decision, go play for his dad. Man, I just want to see him be successful. So I think he had a great upside. He was there in between the Michigan transition between Final Four runs, but big game from him. And I'm surprised people weren't even talking about him. So I don't know. Those are one of the other things that I noticed with the NCAA tournament. You got any predictions going on for this next weekend?
Just fingers crossed. Keep going with the Noles. See that Michigan-Florida State game down the pike.
I know. That's what it looks like it's matching up. Michigan plays Texas Tech, though, and they are almost like mirror images of each other. Just high defense, probably brutal offense, if I'm being honest. So that could be a crazy game that I think right now is a coin toss. Michigan really hasn't played a defense like that. I don't know if Texas Tech has either. It could be 38-38 with 3 minutes left in the game. It could also go haywire with defense causing a bunch of turnovers and end up being like 84-83 or something crazy. So that should be a fun game to watch. I honestly think that West bracket is the best bracket. I've been saying it the entire time. You do have some intriguing matchups in the East, though, with Michigan State and LSU. Although I could see Michigan State blow the doors off them if they start to get things clicking. And then Duke and Virginia Tech, I think Duke's in the same situation. Depth could take over. If things get clicking, those could be two blowouts. I have had Houston as a sleeper. We'll see. They got to turn it up on Kentucky down in I think that's the Midwest. And then UNC is going to take on, I forget who they're playing in the other bracket. But I think they have a clear shot to making the finals, because on the other side you have Virginia playing the Oregon Ducks, which I thought Virginia was on a clear path to be the first number 1 seed to go down. But their bracket has kind of played out where they have the advantage almost the entire way back. Purdue plays Iowa. The winner of that, Virginia will have to play either a 2 or 3 seed in the final, just like Gonzaga would do.
I still don't understand the love fest with Purdue. ESPN writes it up saying
I shouldn't have brought them up.
Michigan beat it's so stupid. They didn't even beat Florida State earlier in the year, and they're getting credit for that win. They're getting credit for beating LSU that they didn't play. They're getting credit for beating Michigan. They got crushed by them.
Hey, I'm just glad that you're finally coming around. I've been ragging on Purdue the last couple of weeks of the regular season because they were going to back into a regular season championship, which they did. And that's the entire reason why they got the seed higher than Florida State, was that fake Big Ten championship. They got toasted by Minnesota in the Big Ten tournament. So I don't even understand why they kept the 3 seed, because a few years ago, was it the 2013 Michigan? They ended up with like a 4 seed, and they were high in the conference, and they were like, not good enough. But this year, Purdue, for whatever reason, they're like, Purdue, they've never won a championship. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They won't choke.
And this is something completely unrelated, but if I'm Zion Williamson, as soon as I graduate or declare for the draft, I'm filing a lawsuit with, was it CBS that carried the game? If you're dedicating a single camera to only like viewing him the entire game, that has to be some form, you should have to be able to get some kind of financial compensation If they're specifically dedicating one camera to you, you would think that you should be able to get yourself some kind of financial support from that.
Matt,
that's exploitation.
It's the same reason why they keep giving why they don't have NCAA football, the video game. Oh, you'll have to pay players. You know what? No, you wouldn't. If you sent residuals to the players that people actually played as, most players would be getting a check for like a penny. You hear that like from the actors. They're like, yeah, I was in a movie. I was a B-list. I get a check for like 15 cents every couple months. That's the residual that most athletes in college would get because no one cares. Unless you're on the cover. Was it Denard was on the cover of the last NCAA football game? Like, unless you're that level or Zion level, you're not going to be making that much money if the NCAA lets you make money off your likeness. And I think a couple states have introduced bills that would allow amateur athletes in those states to earn money, which you would know that would go through every state immediately. Because let's say Texas passes a law and they start to be able to make money, every athlete big time would not sign with Alabama. They would be a Longhorn or an Aggie immediately. And then every other state would be, hey, we got to do an emergency vote right now and get that on the plate. I forget what states are doing it first, but it's bound to happen. Once one state opens that floodgates, just like the legalization of marijuana, other states are all going to do it, or the gambling thing too, because they see the money that's right there. And I mean, can you imagine if you're Texas? If you're Texas right now, the state of Texas, that's exactly what I would do if I was the governor. Put an emergency vote in to try to allow amateur athletes in your state. You want to bring Texas back? You'd be back tomorrow. Your recruiting class next year would be number 1. Your only worry would be the Aggies would be number 2. And you'd be right there. And then you wouldn't have to worry about Alabama anymore. Nick Saban, he'd be a Longhorn coach. He'd take the buyout right then. So you know what? This makes my job 100 times easier. So let him do it. You're right, Matt. I feel bad for that guy, Zion, because it's a case of never living up to the hype. He's not going to be able to do it, just like LeBron. He has to win the championship, which after that UCF, I would be very shocked if they won the championship. Like, I just don't think that they have the experience to pull it off, but we'll see. Anything else you want covered for the NCAA?
No.
Real quick before we get to the final bell, I did have a mailbag. Got a message about Matt Murray. Do you think Matt Murray has what it takes to get it done for a Penguins playoff run to the Stanley Cup? Go, Matt.
Off the top of my head, yes. If they keep playing the way they have been, yes.
All right, because the comment that I received was, there's no way Matt Murray he's not good enough to take the Penguins to that level. The only reason that he was good enough to get them there the first time was because they had Fleury as the alternative goaltender, and they need an alternative goaltender, so this year is a lost cause. Not really much of a question.
If they play defense, if they get the people to keep the puck away from Murray, and he doesn't have to keep having it slammed off his forehead, they got a shot. When he played well was when they were clearing the puck and spending more time in the offensive zone. So it's plausible, but they got to get guys. They got to get the guys that are injured back on the ice, and they got to get that continuity rolling for the playoffs.
And that's 100%. You got to get your team playing consistent and get your lineup comfortable with each other. So we'll see if that happens, but I think that's it for the mailbag. Anything you got for the final bell?
Nope. Just trying to stay warm.
I had 2 things, both Michigan related, so I saved them. There's one perfect bracket for the NCAA tournament. Right now, I think the NCAA thinks it's the first time that's ever happened through the Sweet 16, made by a Michigan man. So give him a shout out, even though he has us losing to Gonzaga. Definitely, if you're going to go crazy on your bracket with perfect picks, pick Michigan to win the national championship next time, Bob.
Then you wouldn't have a perfect bracket.
Matt, if Florida State doesn't beat Gonzaga, or if Florida State beats Gonzaga, he doesn't have a perfect bracket anyway. You might as well go all homer on the last round. And then my last thing, a lot of people have been, and I got some comments on this already. A lot of people were hounding Jim Harbaugh about the co-champs for the Big East Conference or whatever, their division. So he had T-shirts printed up. Co-champs, he gave it out to the team at spring practice. But on the back, they had the 3 losing scores to the games from last year, including the Ohio State and Florida blowouts, from what the players heard. There hasn't been any pictures on social media. But he, number one, did it as a dig, because a few years ago, Ohio State had co-champ shirts presented to them for back-to-back. It was the year I think Michigan State went and got killed by Alabama, the year after Ohio State won the national championship. The following year, Michigan State had the tiebreaker on them. Ohio State still got co-champ T-shirts printed up and passed out. So for whatever reason, the media has been sticking and asking Harbaugh if he's going to do the same thing. So he did, and did a great motivation. And it already pissed off a ton of Ohio State fans because they were mad about it. And I would imagine it pissed off the team. Could you imagine, Matt, if you got a shirt, co-champs, but it had the losing score?
I love it. I love when you sent that to me earlier today. I loved it. That's a great motivator.
It's crazy because they were talking about, they had asked him if they wanted to hang a banner like in the football hall. He's like, no. But the T-shirt idea is great because then you're personally handing it to each player. Like, remember? You could have been full champs if you won just one game. Because it really only came down to one game, the Ohio State game. So we'll see if it pays off this year. A bold gamble. I would imagine it has to piss off a lot of fans. But right in time for the spring game, I love it. I want to see more like that. So that's it for this show. Again, we're on Spotify. Make sure you subscribe. Tell your friends. Follow it on there and any other app that you have. It helps out the show. Go to southboundsports.com. Check things out. I'm trying to get the
store.
Yeah, hit the store. I'm trying to get stuff updated each week. Last week, I focused on Spotify. There'll be other things coming. So keep an eye on that, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.